Hey, what's going on, fam? So, another video. This one is going to be real short. I just want to ask a question. And the question is, and this is a real question. This is a real food for thought question. Even though I honestly already do kind of have the answer, this is a real food for thought question. How are white liberals, especially Bernie supporters or Bernie bros or whatever you want to call them, different from conservatives or right wingers when it comes to the topic of race? Now, what do I mean? A lot of conservatives, obviously, the big thing on race the past couple of years has been the movement or the hashtag known as Black Lives Matter. And of course, this hashtag was used whenever there was an incident. Most times, it was used in other incidences, but most of the time, it was used in incidences of police brutality or a black person, an unarmed black person being killed by a white person, white vigilante, but usually a white cop or a non-black cop. I mean, it's not always specifically a white person. It's not always necessarily a cop, but it's usually an unarmed black person being killed by an vigilante, a non-black vigilante or cop. And they usually, obviously, 95% of the time end up not seeing any prison time or very, very little prison time for their crime of murder. Now, whenever black people say this or tweet it or whatever, what was the typical right wing conservative response? All lives matter, right? Or blue lives matter. And what did not only black people, but all of our white liberal buddies, all of our non black liberal buddies, whether they support Hillary or Kamala or Bernie or whoever, what was their typical, or if you were someone like me in ADOS or a pro-black person or a black first person, what was all of our response to all lives matter? We would use different, especially if it was on the internet, we use different little memes where we would show a neighborhood with all the houses with only one house on fire, and then the firemen were putting water on all the houses that aren't on fire and saying all houses matter, so we're just going to spray all the houses, and actually under the guise of spraying all the houses ignore the house that's on fire. White people understood this, white liberals, or you can find countless tweets of white liberals roasting white conservatives, and Indian people and Asian people who are all more on the liberal side roasting quote unquote racist conservatives for putting up all lives matter tweets or whatever it may be in as a counter to Black Lives Matter, as if they just could not understand that Black Lives Matter is not necessarily an exclusion of all lives matter, right? It's just saying that Black Lives Matter because people are clearly showing that they're not, because it's hot. This type of stuff is happening to us at a higher rate. And what was one of white conservatives' main counterpoints? White people get killed by cops too, which is true, but it's not happening at the rates, at the percentages that is happening to the black population. And again, white liberals were saying this kind of stuff. Tim Wise, all these people clearly understood this. No problem understanding this. All these Bernie supporters, you come to them talking All Lives Matter right now in 2019, they'll break that down. They understand why that's wrong. But then when you ask these same liberals, and especially Bernie, and the reason why we're on him is because it's his turn. We've already gotten on Kamala. We've already gotten on Cory Booker. Um, the channels that I've cited in previous videos, Professor Black Truth, Tariq Nasheed, Jason Black, even Yvette Carnell, Tone Talks, they've all gotten on all these candidates because when they first came out, that was the whole deflection of Kamala supporters. Well, you guys better talk about the other candidates. What about Cory Booker? You're misogynist because what about Cory Booker? What about Bernie Sanders? Well, everybody got their turn, and now it's Bernie's turn in the spotlight. And you Bernie supporters are sounding just like Kamala supporters because, like I proved in my last video, you're just like them. You're neoliberals just like them, and you have the same response. They said, what about Bernie? And now that we're calling you guys out for the reparations conversation, you're saying, what about Kamala? So it's just, y'all are the same people. But anyway, I digress. I got sidetracked too much. And plus, I'm trying to make this video short. The goal is to keep it under 10 minutes. So What is the liberal response to when black people talk about reparations and specific wealth disparities and specific criminal justice disparities that affect specifically black people? It is not the same for Latinos, whites, whomever else. It is specifically for black people. That doesn't mean that there aren't poor white people. Just like Black Lives Matter doesn't mean that no white people get unjustly killed by cops. And these same white liberals fully understand that when it comes to the slogan Black Lives Matter, because that's a slogan, because it's safe for them to stick to that. But when we come to them with specific wealth disparities, specific health disparities, specific quality of life disparities, whatever it may be, for black people, not for everybody, but for black people. And they'll even acknowledge it. They'll not only Bernie, that's why I said white liberals, but especially Bernie bros, not only Bernie, but all these Democrats. They'll acknowledge all the disparities. Yes, there's a huge black white wealth disparity. There's a huge mass incarceration disparity, et cetera, et cetera. They'll acknowledge it, but then they'll offer a solution for everybody. And so my question is, how is that different from All Lives Matter? How is that different from conservative white Trump saying to me, when I say to him Black Lives Matter, his response is All Lives Matter? How is that any different? How is Bernie, when I say to him, we need black reparations for black people? How is Bernie coming back and saying, well, we're going to help distressed communities, white distressed communities, Latino distressed communities, black distressed communities? This is what he said. You can look it up on videos, on the Breakfast Club interview he did this morning, wherever, on CNN Town Hall. He always, on the View interview, he, on all three interviews, he specifically names white, Latino, black. How is that any different than Trump saying all lives matter, except it's in a more drawn out way, and it's a slightly different response to a slightly different question? But reparations is another way of saying to politicians, you guys need to show in action that Black Lives Matter by giving us black specific policies. That's why we didn't say people of color lives matter. That's why we didn't say white and black lives matter. The movement was Black Lives Matter to address this issue that is disproportionately affecting black people and nobody else. So again, that's my question. If you guys get any Bernie supporters trolling you on any various internet, I kept this video fairly short. So just present it to them. And of course, they're going to come back with a bunch of trolling, hypocritical responses. But I challenge you, anybody, to come with a logical answer on how saying we're going to help distress white communities, we're going to help distress Latino communities and black communities every time we ask you for a specific policy for black people. How is that different than a white person, a Trump supporter, or Trump himself saying all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter? The only difference is that Bernie's response is a more drawn out, deceptive way of saying the same exact thing. That's all it is. It's just a more drawn out way. Nobody's saying that there aren't any poor white people. Nobody's saying that you can't have separate policies for all people or for white people or for whomever. But you need to put up this specific policy to address this specific issue, just like you're willing to do for immigrants. DACA doesn't benefit me. I'm not an illegal immigrant or a child of one. So how is that not divisive? I'm not a homosexual, so gay marriage isn't going to benefit me. So how is that not divisive? But reparations are. See, specific policies for the Lilly Ledbetter Act. I'm not a woman, so that policy wasn't going to benefit me. And the Lilly Ledbetter Act was a equal pay policy for women, technically white women, but hey, let's pretend like they do that it was for everybody. It's still not for me. I'm a man, not a woman. So how is that not divisive? But anyway, like, share, subscribe. Peace.